Senate will come back to order. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, March 5, 2021. Mr. President, the following bills passed the House in an amended form. Message number 170, House Bill number 54, Wyoming Meatpacking Initiative, ayes 47, noes 12, excused 1. March 5, 2021, message number 171, House Bill number 95, Game Roadkill, ayes 35, noes 24, excused 1. March 5, message number 172, House Bill number 111, Access to Anatomical Gifts and Organ Transplants, ayes 59, excused 1, signed Wendy Harding, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you. Reports from standing committees.
March 5, 2021. Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 100, Internet Freedom Prohibiting Discrimination, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost. No, Senator Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. March 5, 2021, Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 155, Limiting Firearm Seizure and Regulation During Emergencies, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. March 5, 2021, Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 67, Repeal Gun-Free Zones and Preemption Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, and Nethercott. No, Senator Cost. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. March 5, 2021, Mr. President, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 117, Speech and Hearing Specialist Licensing Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Bouchard, Furphy, Hutchings, and McEwen. Senator Baldwin, Chairman. March 4, 2021, Mr. President, your committee number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 69, Ad valorem Tax Administration, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Case, and Pappas. No, Senators James and Schuler. Senator Case, Chairman. March 5, 2021, Mr. President, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 104, Anesthesiologist Assistance, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Bouchard, Furphy, Hutchings, and McEwen. Conflict, Senator Baldwin. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Senator Baldwin.
Mr. President, just hearing my name, I thought I should jump up.
I was wondering if there was a connection.
Senate File 104, Anesthesiologist Assistance, does have an appropriation. I'd like to re-refer that if I could.
Absent objection, that will be referred to committee number 2, Appropriations. All right. That concludes everything. Okay. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. All right, Senator Cost, it's back in your good hands.
Get this bill done by 3:30.
No, we haven't done anything. We're still in the middle of it.
Senator Perkins give his.
The committee of the whole will resume with discussion on Senate File 80. Is there any discussion? Questions been called? Senator McKeon.
Well, I really can't believe with all my experience in here that anybody would question a bill I brought. But things are shocking, huh? I was kind of waiting to see if there was any more discussion to finish this out. The first point I want to make is we're constitutionally required to do this by Article 1, Section 38, Paragraph C. This solely falls upon us in the legislature. This really isn't an attack on the executive branch. And I'll tell you what I've learned in the Army. You can always delegate authority. You can always delegate decision-making, but you can never delegate responsibility. This falls squarely on our shoulders. So as we broke for lunch, I thought I would do a little research and find just one article that outlines why we shouldn't wear masks. Want to guess who wrote a 38-page paper on why we shouldn't wear masks? Dr. Fauci, about 15 years ago. Now he's saying if we wear 3 masks, it's 90% effective. You're probably wondering why I'm going over that. At the end of the day, I know we're going to involve legislators and we're going to get a lot more people involved in the process. But as we lean back and count on all the experts, I think we've seen that they probably haven't done a bang up job. So I think we need to reel this back into ourselves. Some of the other statistics, the vaccination is almost 95% effective. And the death rate from the vaccination so far is almost, if not higher, than the death rate of COVID. It's certainly a case of the cure might be worse than the disease. Point being is we don't know. And I don't think the experts know. Another point I'd like to bring up is 69 to 70% of all the county commissioners throughout the state support this bill and they want this bill. And I can't tell you the countless number of emails I've received throughout the state to support this bill. So having said that, I would just say one more thing. I don't think if the Black Plague hit Wyoming and we convened here that anybody in this room would open the state up. So I don't think we're in danger of necessarily killing any more people. And as far as it would be difficult to call a session in 30 days or 40 days or wherever we end up on this, just because the task is difficult doesn't mean we should shy away from it. It doesn't mean we should find reasons not to do it. In fact, I would argue the fact that it would be hard to call a special session for this makes this bill even more important and the legislation even more important to get us involved and get everybody thinking, using every asset we can to solve the problem. And with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess fair enough and points made with regard to the need for the Wyoming legislature to do something about all of this and what that is, that's certainly up to us. But at the end of the day, fellow senators, our job is to pass good law. I mean, as my friend from Natrona County pointed out before lunch, this goes in our statutes. And it affects a whole lot more than a pandemic. Let me give a little example, and I want to go to paragraph A, underneath 35-1-245. No public health order is to be issued until there's notice of 48 hours. So I'll take you to my community today, busiest day in the state for high school activities. Thousands of people in that event center up there and all of our kids. And the Natrona County Public Health Department finds a waterborne illness. What are we to do at that point? This says we can't shut anything down. Are we going to let that go for 48 hours before we do something about that? Folks, public health is a lot more than this once every 100-year thing that we dealt with last year. I think we got to be careful with what this law would say. It affects a whole lot more things than just this big pandemic that we've got going on. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what the thoughts are with regard to things like, what if we find a gastrointestinal issue and identify it through public health, and we've got to shut something down to protect the lives of people? What then? I mean, how does the law work in that situation? So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Doxton.
Thank you, and appreciate the efforts, what they're trying to, the sponsors are trying to do here. I guess I heard before lunch, we looked at a few different sections of this bill, and there might be some consideration to some amendments and maybe making it, just making some improvements along the way. Would the sponsor be agreeable to that? And just a quick reminder to the body that we have to be careful with proper names and so forth. So just put that into your list of answering of the questions today. Thank you.
Senator Coe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak in support of this bill, and maybe not as it's currently written in total, but I think it can be worked on and tweaked and get us where we need to be. We're facing a situation we've never had. I give no blame to anyone on how we got here, but we're here, and leadership needs to lead. And I look forward to looking at the future of this and working it through the process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of questions about how this would work, because there's a few things that are unclear to me. And it relates to the mechanism of the 30-day system. And I'm just trying to play this out and imagine if this had been in place a year ago as we were leaving session, how it would play out. And perhaps the proponent can walk through how it might have played out, some examples of that. But based on my read, first of all, there'd be the 48-hour warning, which I with COVID-19, at that point in time, that might not have been a problem, but we heard some concerns with a 48-hour requirement to wait before any orders are taken. That is something that I'm concerned about as well, because if you have a much more virile and much more fast-acting event, waiting 48 hours could be a little bit on the late side. But then when we get to the 30-day window, the question I have is it designed such that if a county like mine that was interested in having an order in place wanted to continue to have 30 days after 30 days after 30 days to this point, so 14 months, whatever the case may be, before a desire to lift a masking order or something along those lines, would that take any external authority or approval, or would my county be allowed to do that while perhaps the next county over would not? And it's a little bit unclear to me, because as I'm trying to look through the workflow, I see requirements for legislative approval of statewide health decisions, and then local health decisions can happen under certain circumstances, but they require reapproval, and then there's limits on seemingly the number of reapprovals. So I'm just wondering how long a public health order that was implemented by a county, if that's the way this is going, could operate without specific approval. That's question one. The second gets to, as I read it, if there is a statewide health order that's approved or ratified by the legislature, it would have to be ratified by the legislature every 30 days. So we would have to have a special session, ratify it, another special session. And then there was discussion, which was unclear to me, about the number of times that could take place. But I had the impression that we couldn't go a year or longer, that we couldn't keep coming back to our special sessions and ratifying over and over again, bringing everybody either here or here virtually. each month. So I'd like some clarification on how that process would work. And then the final question I have really just gets to the efficacy of this. You know, we lost close to 700 lives in the state of Wyoming, over 500,000 nationally. I'm curious if anyone who is a proponent of this legislation did any analysis to contemplate, all right, well, how would it have turned out differently? If we had had this in place, we lost 700 lives. Would we have saved lives with this in place? Would we have lost more lives? Because to me, that seems like it's an important factor. And to the good senator from Laramie County that mentioned it's our obligation as the Senate, as the legislature, to stand up for human health and safety and make sure that we're protecting the people, that the onus is on us to be making decisions based on health, not based necessarily on passion or anger or the fact that most people just find these things uncomfortable and won't wear them all day long like my 7-year-old, he does it each and every day. He's okay with it, but I know most of us don't find it comfortable. I don't find it comfortable. So I guess my question on that is, would this save lives or cost lives, which should be our first and foremost consideration, I think, when we're talking about a pandemic? And then the final question I have for the proponents is why we feel that this chamber, where again, and I think I said it the other day, there's one senator that I'd accept a prescription for aspirin from, and nobody else I'd probably consider that very long. And it's my understanding that individual actually opposed this particular piece of legislation. So the most knowledgeable, the one individual in here that I would consider to be an expert was a no vote out of committee. So I guess I would say, why do we have in this chamber an understanding that is capable of making a more informed, better decision that would usurp the local control, which is effectively what it does, right? The title of this bill is basically granting legislative authority over it. It does some things at the local and county level, but the key to this bill is our ability to be required for oversight, and the fact that we, this chamber down the hall, make that decision. So I'd further ask that. And then the final point, getting to the tall senator from Natrona County, that I guess I had some concern about in the debate, is most of the way this is written assumes a very slow, comprehensive pandemic like the one we had, kind of like it was written for circumstances, but I still kind of want to see how it play out, where most people survive and survive for a while to plan. I'm curious what happens with regard to, I don't even know if we have a succession order for our county commissioners that are responsible for making these decisions, right? You can't have a health order unless the county commissions agree. And it's only for a little while. We have to approve it afterwards. And I've never contemplated like what happens if there aren't any county commissioners, but we're talking a global pandemic. We're talking a health crisis here. Most of the statutes that relate to that offer a month to 90 days. So the authority in one of these emergencies, one of these crises, which is what this is supposed to be planning for, doesn't really anticipate scenarios that are precisely the types of scenarios that a public emergency statute should be anticipating. It seems quite the counter. It seems like this is now written for what we just did, based on our anger about how what we just did transpired. But we've got folks all over the country that are trying to scenario plan, and what we just did isn't necessarily the only scenario out there. So I'd be interested to know if anybody who's an expert in pandemic readiness and in emergency response readiness for health crises weighed in on the process and timeline, the emergency response approach, the succession planning, backup plans, what if the people no longer exist? How were those groups brought in on the drafting process to ensure that this is rigorous and robust in a circumstance that's very different from the one we had just now, Mr. Chairman? So I have some concerns, and it sounds like folks are interested in addressing concerns. So those would be the ones that I would like to see addressed. Thank you.
Senator Backman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just maybe try to answer or comment on the last speaker. I'm not so sure our public health officer is an expert on pandemics. And certainly our chief executive is not. So why do we all have to be if they aren't? What we're talking about here is unbridled, unchecked power that we have conferred upon the executive branch. And all we're trying to do is put reasonable restrictions on that power. Some sideboards. We haven't said sideboards yet this year. We like our sideboards, except for when it comes to pandemics, I guess, and it comes to your rights. So that point I'd like to make. Going back to a point about people will die if we have a 48-hour waiting period on, or a 48-hour heads up before these orders come down. That's assuming that every man, woman, and child in the state of Wyoming is going to sit around and wait for orders from the government to do what's in their best interest and what's to keep their family safe and themselves safe. I guarantee you, if we had an Ebola outbreak or something major where people were a very deadly disease pandemic strike the state of Wyoming, I would not be sitting around waiting for a public health order to tell me how to take care of myself. I'd be hunkered down with my family and we would do what's best for ourselves and we would try to keep ourselves safe. So a little bit of personal responsibility there. I still believe in people to do the right thing. I still believe in individual liberty, and very, very, very nervous about governmental overreach and unchecked power. And I'm very interested in restoring that balance of power. I think this bill goes a long way towards doing that. 30 days, it's still plenty of time. And if the science is there and we come down for a special session during the next pandemic, hopefully we won't be here. It'll be 200 years from now or never. But our predecessors or people that come after us, hopefully will thank us for doing this. And the people will thank us for doing this. And my question is this to those who think that maybe this is more of a personal thing. It is not personal with anybody or any person in power right now. It's a philosophical separation of powers issue. And I would ask you this, would you be comfortable giving this much power to somebody that's really bad? So say somebody completely botches a response to a pandemic and we don't have this bill to be able to say, hey, let's pump the brakes on this. This guy or gal in the governor's mansion's making a lot of bad decisions. If we don't pass this, there's nothing we can do except try to maybe call us in a special session, but that's pretty hard to do. So this is just a reasonable check on the power that we've given the executive branch. I ask your support. Thank you.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I was hoping we could have a little bit of expedited discussion here. Every time you get up and talk, another bill dies. But that being said, Mr. President, I'm going to try to wrap this up. If people want to talk, they can continue to talk. It's always been my observation when you're in a horse race and you load your horse in the gate and the bell goes off and the horses run, it's a good idea to have a jockey on that horse. But Mr. Chairman, this is not going to be law. We've looked at every bill that's come through here. A lot of them has been changed. They're modified. We go through 3 readings here, then we send it down the hall. They take a look at it. It goes to committee, 3 readings, and at any point in time, we can kill this bill. But this is a pretty important issue. And we need to just honor the legislative process. Let's give it a chance. I've got some real concerns that I think many of the members out here have laid out with the current bill. But I also think there are some little gems in here, and I do think we ought to put a jockey on top of that horse at some point in time if we're going to be in this horse race. When we get to the third reading, if we can't figure out how to do that between the 30 individuals in here, then I think then we should vote no. But let's honor the process, folks. That's all we're asking for right now. Give it a chance. You're going to get 2 more shots at it. If it doesn't work, vote it down on third reading. Thank you, and ask for, oh, no.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I like a lot of concepts in this bill. I really do. I think we need some checks. And I think for me, what the biggest concern that I have is, you know, the distinction between these orders. The concern that we heard this last year was how broad they were. It affected a lot of businesses, hundreds and thousands of businesses across Wyoming. But what I really have some issue with is the fact that I remember about 20 years ago, my husband was having breakfast with his dad at a coffee shop in Wyoming. And they went home and they got violently ill and they were sick and they were at a convention. As they were talking to other friends who were also attending that event, other people were getting sick. And so people started asking, what happened? And they contact their county health officer. And it turns out that one of the workers in that particular venue, it's a larger, you know, hotel, coffee shop kind of place, wasn't washing their hands. And so county health went in, shut them down, got to the source of the problem, and took action from there. And so that's the problem I have with this bill, is it ties the hands of the county officials from getting to the source of that problem before more people get sick. And so I think I love so many concepts in here, but I don't want to wait and afford all this due process when you have a situation like that. So that's my first concern. And then second is just kind of the breadth of it. I have no doubt closing businesses, just knowing the economic devastation that's wreaked on our state. But when I look at my kids, it's been a game changer for me this year in Cheyenne to have my children go to school. And the reason they were able to go to school because there was a level of assurance that the face masks were working. And, you know, like most parents, I was a little nervous about sending them back. Was I putting them in danger? Was I putting my family in danger? What was this going to mean? And I've been so impressed with our kids, with our teachers, and their diligence in using hand sanitizer, wearing the masks, that I can honestly say I'm just blown away. And all I can think is if we were in this position last year in March and we were asking, what's the choice? Should we shut everything down? Or should we allow businesses to continue operating, but providing for some of these enhanced protections, like more hand washing, more mask wearing, what have you? I think all of us would have agreed, let's keep our businesses open with these other very inconvenient, I don't like wearing them either, asks. And until we know what's happening, until we know how much it spreads or things like that. And I think most of us would have chose the latter. And so I don't want to tie the hands too forcefully, Mr. Chairman, on the ability to use or have some discussion about whether or not that's appropriate. I know the mask issue has become highly political, but just in my own anecdotal experience and watching how sneezes spread, watching my kids' experience in their public school, I do think they've been effective. And if you visit with people and professionals that wear masks all the time, dentists come to mind. They say we haven't experienced, spreads within dental offices because we wear masks. The ladies who do my hair, who provide beauty services that wear the masks, they've seen hundreds of customers since we've reopened. None of them have gotten sick. And so I don't want to discount some of that science that we know that's out there. And so if this were limited to widespread closures that actually impact and have like numbers behind them of what that means to our economy, I'm there. But when it comes to you need to wash your hands more, provide face coverings for people, especially working in our food service industries. I don't know about you, but I've looked at my food industry a completely different way. When I go through a fast food line, I'm appreciative that those workers that prior to the pandemic coming, didn't wear masks and now are required to. I actually quite appreciate that because I do think there's some value to it. So I would hope that the bringers of this bill would be willing to look at addressing some of those concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Miss
Bill.
Senator Kinski. Go on.
Mr. Chairman, without commenting on the efficacy of masks in the current pandemic, I would note every time I've had surgery, everybody in the room was wearing a mask except me. So there must be some value to it. I certainly would hope so. I want to circle back to two comments that were made on the floor, one by my colleague from Sheridan County and another by the bringer of the bill. My colleague from Sheridan County said if we're called into special session and the science is there, then we'll make the appropriate decision. Folks, I can guarantee you at the beginning of a pandemic, the science will not be there. We'll be faced with what our governor was faced with and what our president was faced with. You are trying to make decisions under conditions of uncertainty. And as to the comment about the CDC director, and first he was for masks and then he was against masks, that's true. If you think back in the pandemic, there was immediately every mask in the country disappeared. People were buying them up and hoarding them, and healthcare workers couldn't get them. So, you remember what happened. People went home, they started sewing masks so the healthcare workers would have them. And what the CDC director said is, there's no evidence that masks make a difference for you and me, but the healthcare workers need to have them. And at that time, the science said there was no evidence for masks for you and me. Subsequently, as science advanced, we learned what the actual means of transmission was, and it turns out that masks do make a difference, that the science does indicate that. So, all of that does, though, in a circular way, argue for the legislature periodically reviewing these things to make sure that as the knowledge of the crisis evolves, as the state of science evolves, that we're fully informed on that and that we participate in the decision making. So I support the bill, although I do think it needs a little bit more work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In committee, we heard a lot of testimony about things like a flood or even things like a restaurant. But I want to point everybody to the bill. It says 351240A, 2 or 4. Well, the restaurant would be covered under 3, Romanet 3. There's other parts on 5 that aren't in this bill. There's other ways and other things that are going to be handled by the health department that aren't covered in here. So I don't think we need to just loosely throw things at the bill when the bill is very specific.
Senator Pappas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too have concerns, same concerns that the tall senator from Natrona County and the short senator from Natrona County and the medium-sized senator from Natrona County. They all brought up some very good ideas, very good things that put in my mind questions about this bill. But I think the bill has a lot of value. It may not be what we want. I probably, if you asked me to vote for it today, I'd probably vote not for it because I think it's got a lot of problems. But that doesn't mean that it can't be made better. And so I am looking forward to seeing what this body can come up with to take some of these issues out of the bill that I'm concerned with and that apparently others are concerned with in these next couple of readings. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this can do. So I think we ought to pass it on to the next next reading, and let's see what happens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McCune.
I think we've definitely beat this horse. Mr. Chairman, excuse me. As far as the 48-hour time frame, I'm not wed to any time frame. And as some of my friends who spent time in funky green printed uniforms and had nuclear, biological, and chemical training will probably back me up on this. If it's a biological agent and it's bad enough, the Army standard to get protected is 17 seconds. So if we're going to try to define a time period, I'm good with that. I'm just saying that if it's this terrible plague we're describing, it isn't going to matter whether it's 48 hours, 1 hour. We can take that part out of the bill. It can go into effect immediately, and I won't have a problem with that. And on that note, I would ask for everybody's favorable consideration, and we'll go back and see if we can't polish this up, and I will call for the question. Mr. Chairman.
We'll get Senator Rouse, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to respond to a couple of points that were made. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the first of those was the idea that we have no recourse right now. It seems to me that the system we have in place right now is pretty good recourse. If we're proposing a mechanism whereby the state legislature of its own volition can call itself into a session to approve or make judgments about how things are being handled and the decisions are made, I would call that the special session process of the state of Wyoming. That's what we would already do. We could have done it last summer. Nothing precludes us. Nothing precluded us then. If we didn't like the way things were going, if we didn't like the approaches the governor was taking, if we didn't like what was happening in our counties, it would have been a simple matter for the members, the majority of each chamber, to call a special session. Challenge, of course, is that we would have to have done it here. That is a challenge in person, based on our understanding. But that's the reason it's there. That's the purpose, is for the legislature to call itself into special session under circumstance of emergency. And honestly, this legislation doesn't necessarily provide us with any more flexibility of how we would call ourselves into session or where we would call ourselves into session. So we'd probably be confronted with the same challenge. When you contemplate that, it's a pretty good system, because what we would do if we had come here, if we had been so frustrated with the decisions that were being made, getting to the idea of what if a horrible person were in charge? Well, if a horrible person were in charge doing horrible things and making bad choices, then we could get here just as fast as we can get here with this bill. And we can write some legislation that says, notwithstanding anything else in this statute, all masking orders will be eliminated. All hand washing in restaurants, let's get rid of that too. Troublesome. Anything else we want. Again, because we're the legislative branch, that's a power that we're imbued with in the Constitution as a balance of power. We chose not to through our inaction. That was a decision we made because there was not a majority of each chamber supporting assembling here in Cheyenne. I don't know how adding more layers of bureaucracy gets us a better position than if we're going to assemble, we should just look at the fact base, the circumstances, and then pass some legislation. Because we're empowered to do that as the legislative branch. Nothing holds us back. The governor can't stop us. It's our legislature. That's a pretty good system right there. That's the response. If we're going slow, if we've got the time, if we're capable of considering it, we've got a month or several months to contemplate, then we're fully empowered to do anything within the Constitution of Wyoming to address the pandemic. We have broad authority. And if we don't have that much time, I don't want a bunch of meetings where we have people getting together and trying to understand the science when they don't, and trying to bring in experts and then have these individuals that are elected disagree with the experts in the science. I don't know how that helps us. And I don't know how it helps us in a way that is any more positive than rising to the level of a special session, which again is where we already are. And I'm not saying the statute's perfect. I'm really not. Obviously, we could make improvements on this statute, just like pretty much every statute we've got. And there probably are improvements that we could make, but the idea of creating what looks to me like chaos of 23 individual counties just scurrying off in different directions depending on whether they believe science or not is probably going to be a bad outcome for the state relative to trying to have an executive response that's cohesive, coordinated, cogent. I did that for the good senator from Laramie County. And that to me seems like the best we can realistically do, and we can already do that. And the final point, Mr. Chairman, I would make, just for those listening at home, there is absolutely no evidence of negative consequences from the vaccine go to the CDC website, read all about it. Thank you.
We're ready for the question? Question's been called. Excuse me. All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate file, better get the right number here, 80, say aye. All those opposed, no? I'm going to call division because I'm not sure. Will all of the ayes please stand? Noes, please stand. Ayes have it, 19-8. Senate File 80 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Our next bill for our consideration is Senate File 130. Please read the file.
Senate File 130, Charter Schools, an act relating to charter schools sponsored by Senator Driscoll. It was referred to Committee number 4, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Ellis, Salazar, and Scott. No, Senator Rothfuss. Senator Scott, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I move when the committee of the whole rise and report that it do so with a recommendation that Senate File 130 do pass. There was no standing committee amendment, and I yield to Senator Driscoll, the sponsor of the bill.
Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to kind of tag team with the good senator on this. He carried the bill in committee for me. I'm going to lay out the basic idea of it. Folks, this isn't a new idea. We already have charter schools in the state of Wyoming, so that's probably the first place I'm going to start at. So they're there. There's 5 of them in place. They're run by existing districts, and they're very successful. If you want to talk to some of the happiest teachers in the state, talk to teachers that teach at charter schools. They like their kids, the kids like the schools, and they make good sense for us. They don't solve our education funding problems or other problems with it, but they play a key role. What they do is they give you a choice. And right now, for a big part of our communities, there is no choice. You either go to the local school, or if you got the bucks, you can go to a private school. And this gives another choice into those communities. So it really, really makes sense. So we have a big chunk of existing charter school law, which a lot of it's in this bill. What this really does is allows the charter schools, there's a lock on the market on it, and it's held by local school districts. And they've formed some, but not everywhere. And this allows, if a local district wants to work together with an outside group, it allows them to form one. And if they don't, or they choose not to, it allows that outside group to go to an outside body, which in this case is the SLIB board. Will work through the bill, but it's the SLIB board. And if the SLIB board agrees with them that it makes sense, they now have a new school board and a new entity that runs it within the district. And they take off, and they have the ability to pick up either abandoned or underused buildings that the district owns. So there's some key components to this that are there. Initially, as I went into this, we got to looking, there's a very successful one out there that's in 12 or 13 states and educates about 25,000 kids now. And that's where we did a lot of the work with, was with a very successful model. High-end students doing really well. We'll displace a few myths for you. You know, one of the ones that I heard when I started, oh, they cherry pick the kids. They just go in and pick the kids. So the way this legislation's written, they don't cherry pick kids. Your kids actually sign up for them. And if there's more applicants for it, then there is capacity. They randomly select the kids. They take special ed kids. They take all religions. They take all races. They follow all the federal rules, just the same as our normal K-12 schools do. Charter schools can be anything K through 12. Some of them may be, as in the academies we have over in Laramie, they may be a portion of that. But anyways, I went into it, the ones that we looked and the ones that were targeted were in big towns, and it only hit 2 or 3 of our big towns that worked really well. And as we got to working through this bill, which I give great credit to the senator from Casper for doing a lot of the heavy lift and getting this bill in the right shape. I had a realization that this bill very likely has the ability to save a lot of our really little rural schools in Wyoming, because when you enter the charter school statute, you don't have to be under all of the normal rules that we have in our schools. So I'm going to use my hometown for an example. Our town of Hewlett is 40 students in high school. I can tell you, it's very likely we're going to be faced with tough decisions whether that school can keep functioning. They're expensive. But it easily could be turned, and I'm not saying it's going to. I haven't talked to our local school board about it. But it easily could be turned into a charter school that was either a CTE or a little different type of school that some of the kids that aren't college bound might want to go to. And this is just a rough example. So you can really do some different types of education. It goes back to what I was talking about. It gives choice and it gives flexibility. And really the guts of this bill, what it does is it says to local school boards, you need to sit down and take an honest look, because first choice, always the default, is to work with them and you stay under your local school board. And this bill doesn't do anything to distract from that, and it allows it to happen. So they can work hand in hand. They get the ADMs and they run the school. But if they choose not to, and you go to the SLIB board, they're funded at 85%. And in that scenario, it does save some money for the state. And it goes under the other end of the board, and now it's outside of their control. So there's a very large incentive in there for local districts to work with someone that wants to form a charter school. That's the main part of what I was looking at. I don't know the quickest way. I think a good chance that Senator Scott could work the bill quicker than I have, because he's run it through committee. I'm happy to do so if he doesn't want to, but it really is a pretty simple bill in truth that does what lots and lots of people in Wyoming want to see happen, which is give us a good look at a different choice of a school. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I will take us through the bill. I will say that I got involved in this. I got approached by a former Speaker of the House who was actually one of my mentors when I first came into this legislature. And he'd been discussing with some of the people nationally. And we started with a model from a national association. And we went over it and put a good deal of home cooking in it, if you don't mind that phrase, trying to adapt it to Wyoming circumstances. So I'm going to go quite rapidly here. In view of the hour, I do not want to go line by line, but let me tell you where you can find things. Key concept here is that if you can't get your approval from your local district, or you're pretty sure you can't, you can go to the State Loan Investment Board, the 5 elected officials, and you'll find that starting at the bottom of page 1 is what they do. Starting on page 6, lines 18 through 20 is the authorization for that. We had testimony in committee this morning from the State Department of Education that they had looked at it, that Superintendent Balo had looked at it, that they feel they would staff it for the slip board, and they feel this is a very workable process. So there's no problem with that. It was mentioned that you have all the protections against getting a biased group, lottery, that sort of thing. You find some of the protections on page 9. We did put in a little home cooking there, specifically authorizing a charter school that concentrated on the at-risk kids, and that would require some selective admissions. We had a school of choice in Casper that did that, was quite successful at it. And we also have a provision there that allows the tribal business councils to support a charter school and give preference to tribal members if they do that. They didn't approach me on this. That was our idea, but it strikes me as we aren't getting good results out of those districts now. Maybe with additional sensitivity, they could do it themselves and do it better. So that's a possibility. It was mentioned that they're exempt from some of the rules. Look at the top of page 12, line 1, the things that they are subject to, the civil rights protections, the health protections, the ability to have the privacy laws, that sort of thing, the accountability provisions, they're subject to those. There's a section on accountability. Look at page 15, lines 9 and the following couple of pages. There's a provision on virtual scale charter schools, page 24, that's a little restrictive, limits them to 250. We were advised nationally there've been some problems in that area and to be very cautious. So we were. There's a provision that's very important on page 20, where the State Loan Investment Board, after it's authorized something, can delegate back to the local school district, providing the local school district and the charter school will agree. We think that system would work better than keeping that at the central level if those two can get along locally. So I commend that to you. There's a provision on page 35 regarding the funding. We hope there's 2 existing formulas for how to do it. One of which is anything the local school district and the charter schools agree to goes in terms of how they share the funding. We hope they will use those provisions, but if they don't, if they can't get along for some reason, then the charter school gets funded at 85% of what the local school district on a per student basis would get. They said some of them told us they could do it for 70. We thought that was carrying it a little too far. So we put it at 85. So potentially it could save a little money, but that's not why we're doing this. Frankly, Mr. Chairman, we're doing this because we think that the pressure of competition will improve both the results for the charter school students and for the students in the public schools. Frankly, we're all human. We can get a little lazy. The pressure of competition is good for all of us and good for the results. And that's the philosophy here. Mr. Chairman, I would say this, we had testimony both for and against in committee. And it is clear that a significant part of the educational establishment does not like charter schools. We had opposition from the School Boards Association lobbyist. We had opposition, Mr. Chairman, from the teachers union lobbyist. Presume she was a lobbyist anyhow. And they do not want to see the competition. And that's why this bill is necessary. Because you have to go to elected officials outside the educational establishment in order to get this thing started the way we need to have it. I represent you. I think it'll improve the quality of education across the state. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I do urge you to support this bill. We need reform in our education system because it's not performing as well as it should. This is an important step. And I think the local districts will find once they get used to the idea that there's some ways that this can really help them. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
There is an amendment. Senator Ellis, do you wish to read that in? Or I mean, do you wish to move the amendment? If I can speak, could I please have you read the amendment?
Senate File 130, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 9, line 14.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 130 and would ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this would delete the preference that the tall senator from Natrona County alluded to for our tribes. And it would just, instead of requiring that allowing a preference to be given to enrolled tribal members, it would apply to a student who is a member or eligible for membership in an Indian tribe. And Mr. Chairman, the reason this is I think a cleanup amendment is there are definitely children on the Wind River Reservation who may have tribal parents in more than one tribe. And so they may not technically be enrolled in either Northern Arapaho or Eastern Shoshone, but are eligible for membership. So I just didn't want them to be precluded from being considered for that preference if the tribes were to open a school. Happy to answer any questions.
Senator Wassenberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of questions. Actually, the language we're amending was my bill years ago. So I was heavily in favor of charter schools. But I do have some questions for the sponsors. First of all, in the original charter school bill, we at that time did not want to allow school districts, if they were closing a high school, to start a charter school to get out of consolidation. And that was language in the law of the bill that we passed. And so my question is to the good senator from Crook County. It seemed like he implied that would be the case. And then the second question I have is
Senator Wassenberg, could I interrupt you for a minute? We have a motion on the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we need to get that in before we can have you finish.
Okay, I'm
Okay, thank you. I've had a question on the amendment. Okay. All those in favor of Senator Ellis's motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 to Senate File 130, say aye. Those opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. I want to make sure I don't need to read that in now. Senator Wassenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then the second question I have is in Campbell County versus Omen 2. Probably the most landmark decision in the Campbell cases that essentially said that the state of Wyoming was responsible for building school buildings in our 48 school districts. And my concern is, and we've done this, we have used state money to essentially remodel or build charter schools. And my question is, I think that there's a large price tag involved with this bill, because if charter school folks ask for a new school, or if they buy a school that we have mothballed, I would say, my question is, will these charter schools cost us money down the road? Not because we're not going to educate them, we're paying for that, and it's 85% of the money flows with the student wherever the student goes. But is there a price tag to the buildings that we might have to build if there's a lawsuit by a charter school saying that we would like a new school, a new brick and mortar school? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First, to the issue of consolidation, Mr. Chairman, that was not my intent, not what I said. What I actually implied was it may make the difference whether the school survives or not to avoid consolidation. Our district, and the example I was trying to give is, we've got a school in our district right now that's at capacity, if not over capacity, that's next to Hewlett. It's down in Moorcroft. I would suggest to you a good part of those children in Moorcroft, by a good part, I don't mean it's a bigger type school now in our district, but a good part of those kids might want to go to a rural ag-based school in Hewlett. And that allows us flexibility within our district. And even if we did it, it's not a consolidation factor, because should Hewlett go down, some of our kids are going to have 65 to 70 mile bus rides to get to school, which means isolation payments or something similar. This is a means potentially these schools can actually do what they're doing and do it better within them. As far as school buildings, and we've watched that, the academy over next county to here in some of the schools, we watched them put some money in them. But they're in an old shopping center building and they're still in it and they're happy about it. And they probably can save, if this works, you probably save construction of new schools is what you've done. Because under our existing structure, what we do is we grow. This town we're in right here, we just got done building a couple. We build brand new schools. What this bill does is allows them to take schools that are mothballed and use them, and they're happy to use them. And our state law doesn't say they have to have brand new buildings. It just says they have to have adequate facilities. So in my opinion, this saves, because it saves in capacity. When you have an alternative school, a charter school, it saves from building brand new schools. And by the way, folks, every one of you can attest to this because you all have one in your community. We don't build cheap type schools. These aren't our old one-room schoolhouses. But the charter schools are happy to go back into a school that's one that was not good enough for the other folks, because their emphasis, in my opinion, this might be offensive, so, is about educating kids, not about having great facilities. Thank you.
Senator Wassenberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another question. In our statutes, we don't allow teachers to be elected to the school board. And in this particular bill, it looks to me like we're going to allow that. We're going to allow employees of the charter school to be on their respective board. Is that correct?
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, let me answer the question two ways. There is a specific provision where if the district is sponsoring the charter school, yes, they could have a member of their school board or one of their employees be on the board of the charter school. That's a matter of internal management within the district. I think they can do that. Mr. Chairman, I think with this language, and I could be corrected, but my memory is that it might be possible to have a teacher on the charter school board. And I would hope it would be, because we have found in my community with the schools of choice that often the origin for one of these things is a combination of parents and teachers who want to do something differently. And under those circumstances, the teachers are really principals in getting the thing going. And I think it does make some sense to allow it. That is an issue that your authorizer can take up and say, okay, it's all right to have one, but don't have any more. That'd be something they could do. But I think it is permitted, but I'll have to double check that to make sure I'm accurate.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hearing a couple different things here, and not all of it's directly related, but it is. As we talk about things such as consolidating schools in the school districts in the future, we're being told that our small schools, and I have four very small schools in my 7 school districts. That we're not talking about closing high schools, we're talking about just consolidating school districts. But then the next thing I hear is, we don't want this to be used to replace high schools because they're closed because of consolidating school districts. So that's, to me, that puts in my mind that the intent is probably of consolidation of school districts is probably to close some of these high schools. Maybe, maybe not. But why would we not want to utilize this tool to replace those high schools when we already got some of these districts, the 3 I'm talking about in particular, have kids coming 40, 50, 60 miles one way to school now? Why would we not give that community the opportunity to use this tool if the districts do consolidate to better protect, to better educate their kids at home rather than send them another 30 miles? You know, we're talking 80, 90 miles one way to school then. So I think it could be a good tool, but I don't understand why we wouldn't want to use it to replace schools if they get closed. Thank you.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I'm on and for this bill, very excited about school choice. I just wanted to remind the body that charter schools are public schools, and just maybe throw out a few numbers that I found on EdChoice last night. There's one state where 95.1% of the students attend public schools, and that's Wyoming. And there's one state where 42, let me get the number right here, 42.3% go to charter schools. And that's the state district where our capital is. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Any more discussion? Or your question?
Question.
Okay. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion, when the, excuse me, committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation for Senate File 130, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Well, it's kind of weak on one side there.
Yeah.
Okay, the ayes have it. Senate File 130 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 87. Senator Driscoll.
Privilege of the floor. This is somewhat out of order probably, and I'm not going to name him by name, but Senator Scott did it briefly. There's a former speaker from Casper that played an absolute key role. When I started this bill, I worked on it for about a month when I found out he'd been working on it for a couple of years. And I don't know if it's proper to say his name or not, but his name's Russ Donnelly. He's past Speaker of the House. And I feel compelled to thank him for the work he's done, because the truth is, I started the ball rolling, realized there was someone else there, and he and Senator Scott did a very key part of the work on this bill that's got my name on it. So thank you both.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and I, with regard to the role that former speaker played, I would second those remarks. It was very valuable, and I would also thank him personally for the efforts he made when I was a freshman to bring me on board to what the legislature was all about. And that's the way it works, and I've been very grateful to work with him again.
Okay, the reading clerk will read in the next Senate file.
Senate File 87, Voyeurism Amendments, sponsored by Senator Cost, an act relating to crimes and offenses. It was referred To committee number 1, Judiciary, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the Senate file. What's your pleasure, Senator Nethercott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the due pass recommendation on Senate File 87, voyeurism amendments. To explain this good little bill, I call on Senator Cost. There is a standing committee amendment, if I can have that read in.
Senate File 87, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, page 3, line 16, after.
Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try a little different approach on this. Ladies and gentlemen, technology has presented us with a world we can hardly imagine. We have dancing robots, which would look like real people. We have automated cars, which we talked about yesterday. And not only automated, but we can sit there and relax and do what we want while they drive down the road, or so said. The voyeurism statute needs updated. It is time to better protect our citizens. Imagine going to a motel room and thinking you were in private. An act of intimacy happens on top of the bed. Up in a corner of the room is a camera the size of an eraser on a pencil, carefully positioned. It videos or takes pictures of the time. Voyeurism? I think we would all probably say yes. What if you were under the sheet? Voyeurism? This statute covers that now. Imagine you're at work and every noon you slip into the bathroom, change to your running clothes, and run during your lunch break. You come back, freshen up, and change back into your work clothes. You feel safe and private. One day you happen to drop your keys as you're preparing, and you reach down to pick them up. Bending down, you see a small camera under the sink, perfectly placed. You grab it, let your boss know you have a serious situation. When the police come to check things out, they find out there are more than 100,000 pictures of you and 3 of your coworkers doing this very same thing over about 4 years. This is a couple of pictures by a person, or is this much more than a couple of pictures by a person? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a situation where I was asked to consider helping out others. The person who was the victim can't change her outcome, but would like to make a difference for others. This bill was given to the district attorneys and they support pursuant to the official position. Let's see what this bill does. As we go through the voyeurism bill, Senate File 87, the act relating to crimes and offenses, excuse me, amending the elements and penalties of the crime of voyeurism, authorizing the imposition of specified probation conditions for those persons convicted of voyeurism, making conforming amendments and providing for an effective date. If you look on page 1, lines 9 through 12, you'll see that the affected parts are going to be Wyoming Statute 6-4-304A, the intro, Romanet 3, by creating new paragraphs, Romanet 5 and Romanet 6, B, the intro, and Romanet 2, and by creating new subsection, Romanet C and F. And then 7-13-304 by creating a new subsection E are amended to read. Page 2, line 1, the insert of except as otherwise provided this section, A, that was inserted into the original bill. You go down to line 8, enclosed was removed. You go down to lines 10 through 15, actually all the way to 18. Purposely left out were Romanet 1, Romanet 2, and Romanet 4. I will read those. Romanet 1 says restrooms. Romanet 2 says baths. Romanet 3 had a change. It has showers. semicolon was there, and or was stricken. Romanet 4, dressing or fitting rooms was already in there. I'm just reading it so you know what was there. Romanet 5, bedrooms, or Romanet 6, under the, excuse me, under the clothing being worn by another person, regardless of whether the person is in a place where the person has a reasonable expectation of privacy. Then on line 20B, except as otherwise provided in this section, a person is guilty of a felony. Excuse me, and it says for not more than 2 years imprisonment, a fine of not more than $5,000 or both. If he, page 3, line 2, Romanet 2, uses a camera or video camera or any other image recording device, the colon was removed. A, for the purposes of observing, viewing, photographing, filming, recording added, or videotaping the intimate areas of another person, added a semicolon. Then on line 9, B was added under, the was struck, clothing being worn by the other person, added was a semicolon and 12, where that other person has not consented to the observing, viewing, photographing, filming, or videotaping was removed and put in was without the consent of the other person. We go down to 16C, a person, and right here's where the First Amendment, or was that the Second Amendment? I'm trying to remember. I believe that was the Second Amendment, but because the Committee of the Whole amendment was there, and so I'll read that in a second, okay? After, I'm assuming that the bearer of the amendment will read that in. A person who commits an offense is specified in this section for which the victim is less than 18 years of age shall be guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment of not less than, again, this was added on the committee amendment 5 and the number 5 replacing 2 years, a fine of not greater than $5,000 or both. A person who commits an offense is specified in this section who has previously been convicted of an offense under this section, this is page 4, of a similar offense under the laws of another state shall be guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment not greater than 5 years, a fine of not greater than $5,000 or both. Line 7 through 9. E, in addition to the penalty specified in this section, a person guilty of the offense of voyeurism shall serve a term of supervised probation of lines 11 and 12, 1 year for a violation of paragraph B, Romanet 2 of this section. Romanet 2 below there on lines 14 through 19 says not less than 1 year and not greater than 2 years for a violation of paragraph B, Romanet 2 of this section where one or more photos, videos, segments, or clips or other images or media of the victim are disseminated to other persons or posted on the internet. And then there's an or on 19 and 20, Romanet 3, not less than 5. This is where the First Amendment was inserted, taking the 3 and the out. 5 years for any violation of the section where the victim is less than 18 years of age at the time of the offense, notwithstanding Wyoming Statute 7-3-13-302B. F was inserted as used in this section. Intimate area means any portion of a person's pubic area, buttocks, vulva, genitals, female breast, or undergarments intended to cover those portions. Intimate areas does not include intimate areas visible through a person's clothing or intimate areas knowingly exposed in public. 13,304, imposition or modification of conditions, performance of work by the defendant. Lines 14 through 17 simply says, as a condition of probation or suspension of sentence for a person convicted of an offense under Wyoming statute 64304, the court may require the defendant to complete successfully a sex offender treatment program. The person who created this crime was 50 years of age. The point of mentioning this is because this isn't a story about a young person getting brave. These crimes lead to involved into other actions later, and it is time to make sure we stop it. Imagine this, a person recording a phone call of any type without permission right now gets a larger fine than a person who committed this described crime. This is just one example of the many cases happening around the state. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to update this statute. With that, I will entertain any questions and ask you to support this bill favorably.
Okay, so there is a standing committee amendment, Senator. What's your discretion on that? Senator
Mr. Chairman,
Neverdot.
I will move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 87. Good senators, the Joint Judiciary or the Senate Judiciary Committee made some minor amendments to the bill. One, they wanted to, on page 3, line 19, enhance that particular penalty from 2 and insert to 5. So we changed it from 2 to 5. And then on page 4, line 21, we gave discretion to the court to have the penalty between 3 to 5 years. So those simple amendments, it's been moved. I'd stand for questions and ask for your favorable consideration on the Standing Committee Amendment number 1.
Any questions on the standing committee amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion to adopt standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 87, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We're back on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, there is a Committee of the Whole Amendment.
I'll have that read in.
Senate File 87, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 3, line 16, delete.
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, I would move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 87 and ask for your favorable consideration. Good senators, this amendment came, this also was a decision made by the Senate Judiciary Committee, but was not included in the original amendment. And what this does is it provides clarifying language to ensure that this particular bill is addressed to persons who are over the age of 18 years. There is a separate statutory provision in our criminal code associated with minors participating in this type of conduct, and we don't want to criminalize minors who are behaving irresponsibly as opposed to criminally. So wanted to make sure that they weren't swooped up into this type of legislation. So happy to stand for questions and ask for your favorable consideration on the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1.
Any discussion on committee of the whole amendment number 1? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion that the Senate adopt committee of the whole amendment number 1 to Senate File 87, please say aye. Those opposed say no. That motion carries. We're back on the bill. Any discussion on the bill? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion that when the committee of the whole rise and report, they do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 87, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Senate File 87 is passed to the committee of the whole. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 93.
Senate File 93, WICHE Repayment Program Veterinary Medicine Students, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee. An act relating to the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education Repayment Program. It was referred to committee number 2, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Garou, Kinski, Perkins, and Steinmetz. No, Senator Hicks. Senator Perkins, Chairman.
Where's Senator Perkins? Senator Perkins was correct. Senator Perkins. There he stood up.
Senator
Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without objection, I ask this bill be laid back one day.
The wishes you command. Senator Driscoll or Majority Speaker, whichever you want to be called.
Mr. Chairman, I move committee a whole rise and report. That was a tricky move getting out of a bill.
We have the motion to move, rise and report. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, nay. Okay.
Sounds like everybody wants to go home. Thomas Cap, 3:30.
There's a lot of little.
Hey, Jim, what's
What?
up?
There's a lot of little easy bells that people have.
We'll get them, we'll bulk them
Other
up.
than Senate File 80
What's that?
and 150.
There'll be a-
Reading clerk will read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. President, your committee of the whole, having had into considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 80, do pass. Senate File 130, do pass amended. Senate File 87, do pass amended. Senators Cost and Boner, Chairman.
They don't have a lot of.
Senator Cost.
Mr. President, I move for the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
Mr. President, I move we stand adjourned until 10 a.m., March 8, Monday.
Announcements. Chairman Scott.
Mr. Chairman, your committee number 4, Education, will meet Monday morning, 8 a.m., room W10 and online. Senate File 143, School Finance Funding Model Adjustments. Senate Joint Resolution 4, School Capital Construction Constitutional Amendment, if time permits.
Chairman Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee, perfect number 10, the healthiest committee in the Senate, will convene on Monday, March the 8th at 8 a.m. in room 6 in the connector to finish up on Senate File 131, Workplace Transparency 2, Senate File 151, Pharmacy Freedom of Choice, Senate File 129, Medicaid Coverage Licensed Pharmacist, and Senate File 154, Medicaid Expansion with Federal Match Requirements.
Chairman Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. The number 1 committee, Judiciary, will meet on Monday at 8 a.m. to hear the following 4 bills. Senate File 98, Bail Source Hearings. Senate File 123, Lottery Games Keno. Senate File 128, Temporary Delegation of Parental Authority. Senate File 66, Slayer Rule, applied to joint ownership. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further announcements, Chairman Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder, your Senate Transportation Committee on Monday upon adjournment will be down just past the toll booth on the Causeway. Room 2 will take up Senate File 73, I-80 Tolling Authority. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Landon. Oh, we have Chairman Anderson. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Or Mr. President, excuse me. Excuse me. Your favorite committee, Minerals, Economic Development and Business, will meet Monday, March 8th to 15 minutes after noon recess in the Capitol Extension Room W004 and online. We'll hear bills Senate File 39, Digital Identity, Senate File 116, Engrossed, Wyoming Business Council Directors Reduction, Senate File 148, Requirements Relating to Depositors Amendments, Senate File 149, Oil and Gas Royalty and Tax Rates, Senate File 152, Connection of Utility Services. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Chairman Anderson, how are you feeling these days?
It seems like it gets better every day, but I had a COVID shot today, so that sort of changed it a little bit.
You share the experience with Senator Kinski. Senator Cooper.
Privilege of the floor. Mr.
Please
President.
do.
I got 2 brief announcements here.
Please do.
First of all, to the interest of everybody, the current price of West Texas International is $66.09, which puts Wyoming Sweet at $56.95 spot price. Good news for everybody. Secondly, our very own Wyoming Cowgirl basketball team will play on Sunday in the Mountain West Conference in Las Vegas. On that team, we have five homegrown Cowgirls. Two of them are starters. One is McKinley Bradshaw of Lyman. The second is Tommy Olson of Orland. These women are unbelievable. So be sure you tune in and watch this deal. Also on that team is Emily Buchanan of Yoder, Jay Johnson of Casper, and Paige Tomer of Encampment. I'm very proud of all these young women.
Good
Thank you, sir.
announcements, Senator Cooper. Good job. Have any further announcements, Senator Nethercott?
Mr. President, I think I might be doing this at the wrong time, but just to communicate, to re-refer Senate File 133, perhaps to Committee Number 10, the Healthiest Committee.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Too late?
Yeah, well,
Great.
let's do that first thing Monday morning.
Will do.
Thank you. Okay, further announcements. I pay close attention to the chief clerk. All right. You've heard the motion. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Everyone drive home safely. Their Senate will come back together again at 10 o'clock in the morning, Monday, March 8th, 10 a.m. Monday, March 8th,